the living force and the cosmic force. These two terms are undoubtedly familiar if you're a Star Wars fan. A nebulous concept, the living force is first mentioned by Qui-Gon Jinn at the beginning of The Phantom Menace. But what are the living force and the cosmic force? What is their connection? And how can we gain a better understanding of the real world and its influence on Star Wars through these concepts? Well, the novel The Living Force by John Jackson Miller gives us a pretty straightforward look at the two. The living force is the one, the individual, and the cosmic force, by contrast, is the many. The cosmic force is the whole thing bound together, the force generated by all living things. These two systems work in tandem with one another. One cannot exist without the other. In the novel, Qui-Gon is described as being focused on the living force. He even suggests to the Council, after having multiple conversations with Yoda, that the Council take a vacation to reacquaint themselves with the living force, having focused too much on the cosmic force, the larger scale galactic picture. This is interesting when we look at it in the context of the films. Qui-Gon definitely has more of a focus on the individual, always looking at the smaller picture to solve his larger problems, which is why he brings up the living force to Obi-Wan at the beginning of the movie. He works up from the living to the cosmic. I suspect this is why so many people see Qui-Gon as a model Jedi. He shows compassion and understanding for the smaller side of the galaxy, the individual, when addressing matters in the Force. And no one better personifies that than Anakin, a slave on a backwater world, not even in the Republic, about as small scale as one can get, being divine, being born of the Force, and destined to balance it on the galactic level. A quote I always find very interesting from George Lucas around the time of Episode 1 is this one. The Phantom Menace refers to the force of the dark side of the universe. Anakin will be taken over by the dark forces, which in turn destroy the balance of the galaxy, but the individual who kills the Emperor is Darth Vader, also Anakin. The tale meanders, and both the prediction and Qui-Gon are correct. Anakin is the chosen one, and he did bring peace at last, with his own sacrifice. Luke couldn't kill the Emperor himself, but he could make Anakin reflect on his life and kill the Emperor. When Anakin falls out of balance, the galaxy falls out of balance. And really, that extends to all living things. When a majority of individuals live out of balance, the shift of the greater cosmic force falls out of balance too. The living force and the cosmic force cannot exist independently from each other. If one is out of whack, the other is as well. And we see this theme played out heavily in The Phantom Menace with its own emphasis on symbiosis. For any non-Spider-Man fans out there, symbiosis is the interaction between two different organisms living in close physical association, typically to the advantage of both, or a mutually beneficial relationship between different people or groups. Obi-Wan talks about this with the Gungans and the Naboo on Naboo, but there is another symbiosis talked about in The Phantom Menace as well, the midichlorians.
Midichlorians are a microscopic life form that resides within all living cells, and we are symbionts with them. Life forms living together for mutual advantage. Without the midichlorians, life could not exist.
They are what a Jedi hears or feels when following the will of the Force. They are also heavily based on our own real-world mitochondria. Now, I bet you thought to yourself, the powerhouse of the cell, and you'd be right, but there's so much more than that. Mitochondria are organelles that live in the cells of practically all multicellular organisms. Scientists believe, in the extremely distant past, they were their own independent life forms that were swallowed up by a cell and, instead of being digested, incorporated into the host in a symbiotic relationship. Millions, or most likely billions of years later, and we still benefit from this reaction, an interdependence. But this also comes from real-life spiritual inspiration as well. It's no secret that a lot of Jedi ideals and teachings are based on concepts from Buddhism, and this is no different. Buddhism, and a lot of other Eastern religions and philosophies, have a very strong focus on the interconnectedness of all things. In the Mahayana branch of Buddhism, the concept of sunyata, which commonly translates to emptiness, talks of an emptiness, not in a sense of something being hollow, but of something being made of individual parts that all have origins from other beings, processes, and parts that have their own individual origins, and so on. Nothing is independent, everything is interdependent. In Zen Buddhism, which spread to California and was quite popular there during the time when George Lucas was growing up, the very similar concept of interbeing talks of a similar interdependence in all things. The food we eat was grown by someone, trucked to its location by another, stocked on the shelf by someone else. The store we bought it from was maintained by people who also need food, buy that food that was grown and shipped to other places, and so on. Those trucks that ship the food are made of parts, made in so many different places, by other people from around the world, and so on. I have no doubt this concept informed George when writing Star Wars, and especially in The Phantom Menace, where the Buddhist influences are definitely less subtle than elsewhere. The statues in the sacred place, for instance. As Luke talks about in The Last Jedi, the Force is a tension and a balance between all things. Yoda talks of the energy flowing between the rock and the tree. Life creates the living force, and it grows and binds the galaxy together in the cosmic force. And this symbiosis, as depicted by the midichlorians more directly, is the most important aspect of the Force in Star Wars. The dark side is the absence of this cooperation, its selfishness, an unnatural independence, and the incapability of working for the greater good. When the galaxy is strongly influenced by people who work only for themselves at the cost of others, the balance is lost. The Jedi's practice of selflessness and compassion for all living things is meant to counter this. An inner balance within oneself that is so heavily emphasized by the Jedi is important in keeping the balance of others around you in check as well. When one is out of balance and lashing out, others may suffer and become unbalanced in turn. And with the interconnectedness of all life, that can spread the galaxy over. This is why preventing the Sith from gaining influence over others, fostering the hate and anger which give them power, must be stopped, and why George saw the Sith's mere existence as enough to be a risk to the cosmic force. The Jedi's undoing, perhaps, was the heavy focus on that cosmic influence at the expense of the living beings around them affected by the Clone Wars. A too heavy focus on one aspect over the other brought the galaxy out of balance when Anakin fell. When Anakin returns to the light and finds balance, the galaxy does too. This is what balance means in a cosmic sense, when the majority of the living force is working in harmony and suffering is minimized. It isn't until Ben Solo's fall to the dark side that the balance of the galaxy is once again thrown off, as the influence of the dark side, for the first time since Endor, is once again stronger than that of the light. Without the Jedi, there can be no balance, as Lord Santeca puts it in the opening minutes of The Force Awakens.
Now we have a chance.